On Galactic Hub-9, the strong usually eat the weak. But today, the strongest warrior on the station is running for his life. Something is coming. Something so dangerous that even a heart-eater dares not look it in the eye, but it isn't a monster. It's something much, much worse that he doesn't growl. He doesn't hiss. He simply waits. Every alien on this station is hiding. Except for one that they think she's a monster tamer. But to her, he's just her little baby. The Galactic Hub-9 was not a place for the weak. It was a massive space station sitting at the edge of the galaxy, a dark and metallic city floating in the stars. Thousands of different alien species lived here. Most of them were hunters, soldiers, and warriors. On this station, size and strength were the only things that mattered. If you were big, you were respected. If you were small, you were usually dinner. Among all the residents, nobody was more feared than Korg. Korg was a Varshok, a species that stood 8 feet tall. His body was covered in thick, dark green scales that were as hard as armor. He had 4 arms, each ending in claws that could rip through steel. The Varshok were famous across the universe for one terrifying reason: they ate the hearts of their enemies while they were still beating. Korg had won hundreds of battles. He walked through the station like he owned it, and even the toughest security guards moved out of his way. One afternoon, Korg was walking down the main hallway of Sector 4. His heavy boots made a loud thud-thud sound on the metal floor. He was looking for his next meal, his yellow eyes glowing with hunger. But suddenly, Korg stopped. He didn't just stop, he froze. His large nostrils flared as he caught a scent in the air. It was a smell he had never encountered before, yet every cell in his body began to tremble. The brave warrior, the heart-eater, turned pale. His scales, usually dark and vibrant, became a dull gray. He looked down the long, empty corridor, and for the first time in his life, Korg felt pure, cold terror. He didn't draw his weapons. Instead, he quickly backed away. He found a side maintenance room, scrambled inside, and shut the door. He was sweating, breathing heavily, and praying that whatever was coming didn't notice him. The hallway was now completely silent. The hum of the station's engines was the only sound. Then, a new sound began. It was very quiet. Click. Clack. Click. Clack. It was the sound of tiny, sharp points hitting the metal floor. It wasn't the heavy thud of a monster. It was rhythmic, calm, and slow. It was the walk of something that knew it had nothing to fear. Out of the shadows of the far corner, the monster appeared. It was not a giant beast with many eyes or poisonous fangs. It was a small, domestic house cat. His fur was a bright, ginger orange, with white patches on his paws that looked like tiny socks. His name was Oliver. To a human, he was just a cute, 10-pound pet. But to the aliens of Hub-9, he was an enigma, a mystery they could not solve. Oliver walked into the center of the hallway. He didn't look left or right. He moved with a grace that no alien technology could copy. He stopped right in front of the door where Korg was hiding. The giant Varshok was watching through a tiny glass window, his heart racing. Oliver looked at the door for a moment. He didn't hiss. He didn't growl. He simply sat down, lifted a paw, and began to lick it calmly. Then, he let out a wide, bored yawn, showing his small but needle-sharp teeth. This was the Orange Terror. The narrator explains that on this station, there is a secret rule that every predator knows. Whether you are a 3-headed wolf from the ice moons or a giant insect with acid blood, you do not cross the path of the ginger cat. Scientists on the station had studied him from a distance. They saw that he had the eyes of a killer, eyes that could see in total darkness. They saw his whiskers, which could detect the slightest movement in the air, but the most frightening thing was his attitude. In the wild, most animals show fear or anger when they meet a threat. Oliver showed nothing. To him, the 8-foot-tall warriors and the deadly monsters were not even worth his attention. He walked through the station as if he was the king and everyone else was just dust. This lack of fear was what terrified the aliens the most. Their primal instincts told them, if this tiny creature is not afraid of us, it must be because it knows it can kill us all. The prey animals on the station, the smaller, peaceful species, felt it too. They would hide in the vents when Oliver passed by. They called him the apex of apex. They believed he was a prehistoric god of death sent from a forbidden planet called Earth. The mystery grew every day. No one knew why the humans brought him here, and no one was brave enough to ask. As Oliver finished cleaning his face, he stood up and stretched his back into a high arch. He gave one last look at the door where the brave Korg was shivering in the dark. With a soft meow that echoed like a death whistle in the quiet hall, Oliver continued his walk. He was heading toward the docking bay, where a new group of aliens had just arrived. They didn't know the rules yet. They were about to learn why the entire station made space for the human's cat. The atmosphere on Galactic Hub-9 was always heavy with a strange kind of fear whenever Oliver, the ginger cat, was wandering the halls. News of Korg's retreat had spread like wildfire through the station's communication networks. Every alien, from the smallest insectoid to the largest armored beast, was now talking about the orange shadow. They watched the security cameras with wide eyes, trying to understand what kind of dark energy this creature possessed. To them, Oliver was not a pet, he was a silent guardian of Earth's deepest secrets. They believed that his small size was just a trick to hide his true power. In the middle of this tension, Captain Sarah walked into the station's main plaza. She was a human, and compared to the giant aliens around her, she looked quite fragile. She wasn't wearing heavy armor or carrying massive plasma cannons. She was just wearing her simple blue flight suit, holding a small plastic bowl and a bag of kibble. The aliens in the plaza stopped what they were doing. They held their breath as they saw Sarah walking directly toward the spot where Oliver was sitting. To the aliens, it looked like a brave priestess approaching a sleeping dragon. Sarah spotted Oliver sitting on top of a very expensive navigation console. Any other creature would have been shot for touching that equipment, but the station guards were too afraid to move Oliver. Sarah didn't look afraid at all. In fact, she had a big, bright smile on her face. "There you are, you little troublemaker," she shouted. Her voice echoed through the silent plaza. The aliens flinched. They couldn't believe she was raising her voice at the apex predator. They expected the cat to turn around and delete her from existence with one swipe of his claws. Instead of a battle, something even more confusing happened. Sarah reached out and grabbed Oliver. She didn't use a cage or a leash. She used her bare hands to pick him up and pull him close to her face. The Lirans, a bird-like species with very sensitive nerves, almost fainted from the sight. They watched in horror as Sarah rubbed her nose against Oliver's fur. "Are you a hungry little pumpkin?" "Yes, you are. You're just a tiny baby, aren't you?" she cooed in a high-pitched voice. To the aliens, this didn't sound like love. They thought she was using a hypnotic, human war chant to keep the beast under her control. The suspense reached a breaking point when Oliver decided he had had enough of the hugging. He let out a sharp meow and used his back legs to gently push against Sarah's chest. In the process, his sharp claws accidentally left a tiny red scratch on Sarah's arm. The entire plaza went dead silent. A drop of human blood was visible. Every alien reached for their emergency shields. They were sure that now, the human would realize her mistake, and the cat would finish the job. They waited for the explosion of violence that always happened when two predators fought on Hub-9. But the violence never came. Sarah didn't scream in pain. She didn't pull out a weapon. She just looked at the scratch, laughed, and kissed Oliver right on the top of his fuzzy orange head. "Oh, you're being a grumpy boy today, aren't you? Someone needs a nap," she said playfully. She put him down, and Oliver began to rub his body against her legs, purring so loudly that the floor vibrated. The aliens were paralyzed with confusion. They realized that the most dangerous creature on the station wasn't just the cat, it was the human who could treat such a monster like a baby. The rumors began to change that day. The prey species started to whisper that humans were the masters of chaos. They believed that humans had spent millions of years training these orange demons to be their personal bodyguards. If a human could ignore a wound from an apex predator and laugh about it, then what could a human do to an enemy? The fear of Oliver began to turn into a deep, respectful fear of humanity. They saw the bond between the girl and the cat as a dark pact, a secret alliance between two of the galaxy's most unpredictable species. As Sarah walked away, with Oliver following closely behind her, the aliens stayed hidden in the shadows. They watched the way Oliver's tail flicked back and forth like a rhythmic warning. They didn't see a pet and its owner. They saw a commander and her most loyal assassin. The mystery was no longer just about the cat's power, but about the human's strange ability to walk side by side with death. The station felt even more dangerous now, because everyone knew that if you touched the baby, the human wouldn't be laughing anymore. The peaceful, yet tense, atmosphere of Galactic Hub-9 was about to be shattered. A massive, black ship, covered in spikes and battle scars, docked at the station's primary port. This wasn't a trading vessel or a research ship, it was a warship belonging to the Zorlax, a race known across the stars as Godslayers. The Zorlax did not care about trade or diplomacy. They only cared about the hunt. They traveled from system to system, seeking out the largest and most dangerous monsters to kill and claim as trophies. Their leader, Commander Vane, was a legend of terror. He was a giant creature with 4 glowing red eyes, skin like cracked stone, and a necklace made from the teeth of dragons. As Commander Vane stepped onto the station, his heavy metal boots crushed the floor tiles. His soldiers marched behind him, their weapons glowing with purple energy. The air in the docking bay became cold. The other aliens on the station, the ones who had learned to respect Oliver, quickly moved away. They knew that the Zorlax were arrogant and loved to pick fights. But Commander Vane noticed something strange immediately. Usually, when he arrived at a station, everyone ran away from him. But today, he saw a group of battle-hardened mercenaries standing in a corner, staring in the opposite direction with looks of total panic. Vane followed their gaze and saw something that made him stop. Sitting on a high, sunny window ledge was a small, orange ginger cat. Oliver was slowly licking his paw, completely ignoring the arrival of the most dangerous hunters in the galaxy. To Vane, this was an insult. He had killed beasts that could swallow ships, and here was a tiny, soft creature that didn't even acknowledge his presence. Vane let out a deep, gravelly laugh that sounded like rocks grinding together. "Is this the apex predator I heard about on the long-range scanners?" he mocked, pointing a massive finger at Oliver. "The great Godslayer has come to Hub-9, and the residents are shaking because of a ball of orange fur." The station administrator, a thin alien with many arms, rushed over to Vane, trembling. "Please, Great Commander," the administrator whispered, his voice shaking. "Do not mock that creature. We do not know its full potential. The humans call it a cat, but we have seen the strongest warriors retreat from its path. It possesses a psychological aura that we cannot explain. Please, stay away from it for your own safety." Vane's red eyes glowed brighter with anger. To him, being told to stay away from a small animal for safety was the ultimate insult to his warrior pride. He pushed the administrator aside with one hand, sending him flying across the room. Vane walked closer to the ledge where Oliver was resting. Every step he took was like a drumbeat of doom. The station's inhabitants watched from behind crates and pillars, their hearts beating fast. They were sure they were about to see a massacre. Vane stopped just a few feet away from the cat. Oliver finally stopped licking his paw. He turned his head slowly and looked at Vane. He didn't stand up. He didn't growl. He just stared with those big, emerald green eyes, eyes that had seen the birth and death of stars, or so the legend said. The silence in the room was so thick you could hear the hum of the light bulbs. "You look like a weak snack," Vane hissed, leaning his giant face close to the cat. "I have hunted the void whales of the nebula. I have tasted the blood of the sun serpents. Why should I not crush you right now?" He reached for a heavy blade at his side. But then, something happened. Oliver didn't move an inch. He didn't even blink. He just stared into Vane's 4 red eyes with a calm, cold focus. For a split second, Vane felt a shiver run down his stone-like spine. He saw his own reflection in the cat's eyes, and for the first time in centuries, the God-Slayer felt like he was the one being hunted. He pulled his hand back from his sword, his mind racing. He realized that this tiny creature wasn't scared because it didn't see a giant, it saw something small and insignificant. Vane turned to his soldiers, trying to hide the sudden sweat on his forehead. "We will let it live for now," he growled loudly, trying to sound brave. A warrior does not waste his time on such small prey. But everyone saw it. They saw the way Vane's hand was shaking. They saw the way he walked a little faster to get away from that window ledge. The God-Slayer had met the ginger cat, and for the first time, the Slayer was the one who felt like a victim. The suspense was now at an all-time high. The entire station knew that Vane would try to prove his strength again, and the next time, the cat might not be so polite. The main canteen of Galactic Hub-9 was the heart of the station. It was a massive hall where hundreds of different species gathered to eat, trade stories, and rest. Usually, it was a noisy place filled with the sounds of clicking mandibles, roaring laughter, and the clashing of metal plates. But today, the atmosphere was different. In the very center of the hall, sitting on a high-gloss metallic table, was Oliver. The ginger cat was curled into a perfect orange circle, his tail tucked neatly around his nose. Around him was a 10-foot circle of empty space. No one dared to sit near him. The toughest mercenaries in the galaxy were eating their meals at the very edge of the room, keeping one eye on their food and the other on the sleeping demon. Suddenly, the heavy sliding doors of the canteen hissed open. Commander Vane walked in, followed by his squad of Zorlax warriors. He was still burning with shame from his earlier encounter on the docking bay. He could feel the other aliens whispering about him. He could feel their eyes watching him, wondering if the God-Slayer was actually afraid of a small ball of fur. Vane's pride was his greatest strength, but today, it was his greatest weakness. He looked at the center of the room and saw Oliver. The cat didn't even wake up. He didn't even move a whisker. To Vane, this was the ultimate sign of disrespect. He decided that he had to show everyone who the real master of the station was. Vane marched through the crowd. His heavy armor clanked with every step, sounding like a death bell. He reached the table where Oliver was sleeping and slammed his massive, stone-like hand onto the metal surface. Boom! The sound echoed like a cannon shot through the canteen. Plates jumped, and several aliens dropped their drinks in fear. The entire room went silent. Every eye was fixed on the table. Vane leaned forward, his 4 red eyes glowing with a dark, hungry light. He was inches away from Oliver's face. He wanted to see fear. He wanted to see the cat run away screaming. He wanted to prove that this creature was nothing but a weak animal. Oliver slowly opened one eye. Then, he opened the other. He didn't jump back in terror. He didn't hiss. He simply uncurled his body and stood up on his 4 white-socked paws. He looked at the giant hand that had just hit the table, and then he looked up at Vane. The cat's pupils were wide and dark, like 2 black holes that could swallow the sun. A strange thing began to happen in the canteen. Every predator in the room, aliens who were born to hunt and kill, felt a sudden, sharp pain in their chests. It was their ancient, predator instinct. It was a biological alarm that only went off when a creature met something much higher on the food chain. Their brains were screaming one word over and over, danger. The suspense in the room was so heavy it felt hard to breathe. Vane felt it too. He was a hunter of gods, but as he stared into Oliver's unblinking green eyes, he felt small. He felt like a mouse looking at a mountain. Oliver didn't act like a pet. He acted like an ancient judge deciding if Vane was worth the effort of a hunt. The cat slowly began to sharpen his claws on the table's surface. Scritch. 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 The sound was tiny, but in the silence of the canteen, it sounded like a knife being sharpened for a kill. Oliver's tail flicked once, twice, hitting the table with a soft thud. Vane's breathing became shallow. He tried to speak, to shout a command, but his throat felt dry. He realized that the cat wasn't looking at his armor or his weapons. The cat was looking at his neck, at the soft spot where his lifeblood flowed. The ginger cat wasn't scared because he wasn't seeing a commander, he was analyzing a target. The Godslayer took a small step back, his boots dragging on the floor. He realized that if he moved 1 inch closer, something terrible would happen, something he might not survive. The entire canteen watched in total shock as the most feared warrior in the sector started to tremble in front of a 10-pound house cat. The air in the canteen was frozen. Commander Vane knew that he was losing his reputation with every second he stood there trembling. He looked around at his soldiers and saw the doubt in their eyes. They were starting to wonder if their leader was a coward. This thought made Vane's blood boil. He decided he had to act. He didn't want to kill the cat anymore, he wanted to crush it to show his dominance. With a roar of fake bravery, Vane launched his massive, clawed hand toward Oliver's neck. He moved with the speed of a professional hunter, a move that had killed hundreds of creatures across the galaxy. To the observers, it looked like the end of the ginger cat, but then, the laws of physics seemed to bend. Oliver did not run away. He did not jump off the table. In a blur of orange motion that was so fast the alien eyes could barely track it, Oliver simply shifted his position. He moved just an inch to the left, and then an inch to the right. Vane's giant hand slammed into the empty metal table with a deafening clang. Before Vane could pull his hand back, Oliver was already standing on top of the alien's armored forearm. The cat's weight was nothing, but his presence felt like a mountain. Oliver didn't bite. He didn't use his claws yet. He simply stood there, looking directly into Vane's top 2 eyes, and let out a sound that no one on the station had ever heard. That it was a low, vibrating hiss. But this wasn't a normal cat hiss. To the aliens, the frequency of the sound felt like a biological weapon. It was a sound that triggered the death response in every living heart in the room. The vibration went through Vane's armor and straight into his bones. It felt like the sound of 1,000 hungry ghosts. Oliver's back arched into a high, sharp curve, and his fur stood on end, making him look twice his size. In that moment, Oliver didn't look like a pet. He looked like the ancient ancestor of every nightmare the galaxy had ever forgotten. He was the shadow in the tall grass, he was the eyes in the dark. Vane looked into Oliver's green eyes and saw something that broke his spirit. He didn't see an animal reacting in fear. He saw a cold, calculating mind that was already imagining 10 different ways to end his life. He saw the void, a hunger that had existed since the beginning of time. Vane realized that his armor was useless. His strength was useless. He was a Godslayer who had finally met a creature that didn't believe in gods. The hunt was over before it even started, and Vane was the prey. His legs, which had carried him through 100 wars, finally gave out. He stumbled backward, his heavy body crashing into a stack of metal trays. The great Commander Vane did not stand up to fight again. Instead, he scrambled away on his hands and knees, pushing past his own soldiers in a desperate rush to reach the exit. He didn't look back. He didn't say a word. He just wanted to get away from that small, orange creature and the terrifying silence of its gaze. The canteen remained quiet for a long time. The other aliens looked at Oliver, who was now calmly sitting back down on the table as if nothing had happened. He began to lick his paw again, cleaning off a tiny speck of dust. The Godslayer was gone, defeated not by a gun or a bomb, but by the pure, concentrated aura of an earth cat. The silence in the canteen was heavy. No one moved. No one spoke. The most feared warrior in the galaxy, Commander Vane, had just run away in tears because of a small orange creature. The other aliens looked at Oliver with a new kind of respect, the kind of respect one gives to a ticking time bomb. They wondered what would happen next. Would the cat hunt the rest of them? Would he claim the station as his own kingdom? Oliver, however, seemed bored. He jumped down from the table, his tiny paws making a soft thud on the floor. He began to walk toward the exit, and the crowd of alien mercenaries parted like a sea. They didn't just move, they ran to get out of his way. Just as Oliver reached the heavy sliding doors, they opened with a hiss. Captain Sarah walked in, looking a bit tired. She looked at the mess in the canteen, the overturned tables, the spilled food, and the empty space where a fight had clearly happened. Her eyes landed on Oliver, who was sitting near her boots, looking up at her with big, innocent eyes. "Oh, Oliver," Sarah sighed, putting her hands on her hips. "Did you cause trouble again? I leave you alone for 10 minutes and the whole room looks like a disaster zone." The aliens watching from the corners were frozen. They couldn't believe their ears. She was scolding the creature that had just defeated a god-slayer. To the horror of every alien in the room, Sarah reached down and picked Oliver up by the scruff of his neck. On many planets, touching a predator's neck is a declaration of war. But Oliver didn't fight back. He didn't hiss. He let his body go limp, and his long ginger tail curled around Sarah's arm. He even let out a small, high-pitched mew that sounded like a tiny bell. Sarah tucked him under her arm like a bag of groceries. "You're a bad boy, Oliver. No extra treats for you tonight," she said firmly. She started walking toward the exit, completely unaware that she was carrying the most feared being on Galactic Hub-9. The station commander, a wise old alien who had seen many wars, watched them leave. He finally understood the terrifying truth. The cat was indeed a perfect predator, a creature of pure instinct and ancient power. But the humans were even more frightening. A species that could take a monster, bring it into their homes, and call it pumpkin was a species that had no fear of the dark. The humans didn't use the cats as weapons, they used them as companions. They had tamed that apex of apex so completely that they forgot it was even dangerous. This realization sent a chill through the hearts of every alien on the station. If humans could dominate a creature like Oliver with nothing but a kiss on the head, then the rest of the galaxy stood no chance. As Sarah walked down the long, metallic hallway toward the human living quarters, she didn't notice the security cameras following her every move. She didn't notice the giant warriors hiding in the shadows as she passed by. She was busy talking to Oliver about what they should watch on TV. But just before they turned the corner, Oliver looked back. He peered over Sarah's shoulder and fixed his eyes on the last security camera. For a brief second, his eyes glowed with a strange, golden light. He gave a slow, deliberate blink, the mark of a hunter who knows he is the master of his world. The legend of the Orange Shadow stayed on Hub-9 forever. From that day on, no alien ever dared to challenge a human, and no one ever dared to stand in the way of a ginger cat. They learned the most important rule in the galaxy: Earth is not just the home of humans, it is the home of the creatures that humans have chosen to love. And if you cross one, you cross them both. The station was safe, the God-slayer was in hiding, and Oliver was heading home for a nap, proving once and for all that in a universe full of monsters, the small ginger cat was the true king.